David, I'll just direct a question towards you now, maybe getting down more to developing country issues. The question here, and actually potentially developed country issues too. What are the prospects for solving or moderating the crisis of a growing population of climate change refugees? Whose responsibility does it become? What is the role of the international community in addressing this particular crisis?
I think the question is wrongly formulated. There is very little evidence of this mass migration of climate refugees. All the literature on environmental refugees is also misleading. I work a lot with very low-income groups in slums, in squatter settlements. They move to adapt. They move in response to changing circumstances. The moves are usually local. Oddly enough, migration is seen as a problem in much of the climate change discussions. Actually, migration is the means by which individuals, households, communities, networks are going to adapt to climate change, and we should be applauding and supporting that movement. It's only if the rich world don't meet their obligations to mitigation that we'll get the catastrophes which then undermine everyone's migration patterns, including quite a lot of non-poor people.
Okay, thanks. Richard, I'll just direct one to you now. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try and get as many as I can. The question is, would it be preferable to replace the current approach of one carbon price for all GHGs with separate agreements for sectors, steel, cement, aluminium, etc., and funding mechanisms for avoiding deforestation, afforestation, etc., where we can be more ambitious?
Well, I don't know if I have the answer to that. I think that all of these techniques, I mean, if it's possible to put in agreements that are related to sectors, I don't see any problem in that. I think it would probably be a good thing as part of a broader package. But I don't think that these sectoral agreements can substitute for some sort of overall goal that countries commit themselves to.
Michael, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I do. I do think we need to see more sectoral discussion and realities. And I think one of the problems we're certainly bumping up against in Europe in trying to toughen up the European trading scheme is the reaction concerns of a few key sectors that have at least some international mobility to try and escape constraints. Mm-hmm. However, I think the question goes much too far in suggesting that you could solve everything on a sector-by-sector approach because, frankly, sectors are going to be just like countries. They want to know, are we all in this together? Is my competitor in a market for, say, building products between steel and cement, are they facing remotely comparable kind of constraints? And you could easily get lost in an awful lot of technicality and get captured by the industry's concerns. So I think whilst it is a comment with a sort of an important message about the need to understand sector characteristics and engage with them, I don't think it provides a sort of magic alternative solution at all.
Okay, thank you. Richard, if I could just direct another one towards you that's US specific. US climate bill does not seem to have space to be voted in the first semester. Since the meetings until COP16 will need to address hard issues, is it reasonable to believe that we are going to have the US on board with the aim to really move ahead?
Well, it's going to be close. I think it's going to be a very difficult thing to get the U.S. Congress in the current situation in the United States to move on that kind of a legislation because it is controversial and will involve costs for U.S. interests. I don't rule it out. It could happen in time to be in place, but I can't give any assurances on that. It may well take longer than that.
Okay, David, if I could direct this one towards you, I'm not sure if this is necessarily an area of your expertise, but it was asked during your talk. There are IMO and Antarctic Treaty meetings this year on climate change, a CBD COP in Japan, and it is the International Year of Biodiversity with many events. How will these processes contribute to the lead up to Cancun?
Can I pass that to Michael Grubb?
Please do. Michael?
Gee, thanks, David.
It's just I don't know.
I mean, I don't know, and I'm not sure anybody would know. Some may be more relevant than others. The one that I would actually single out for interest may sound very surprising, which is IMO. But then I'm looking at this from a sort of emissions mitigation and financing perspective, whereas obviously scientifically Antarctica is pretty crucial. What I think is interesting is, well, back to the earlier point about sectors, international marine is actually a really sizable chunk of emissions. It's almost as much as aviation. It's not quite as large as cement or steel, but it's on a par with aviation. It is the one sector for which no geographically restricted regime seems to make any sense, because it is so easy for ships to just bunker, i.e. fill up with fuel almost anywhere. So, I mean, infinitely easier for ships to do it than even for airlines. So it is really extraordinarily hard to fashion any solution that would govern shipping emissions that is not intrinsically global and not split between different regions, etc. The other feature I think makes it really interesting is that a lot of people would say the obvious instrument to use for something like the marine sector would be a financial incentive to encourage ships to be more efficient, burn fuels more efficiently, etc. Use biofuels or a whole range of things. You don't really want governments to try and set everything, all those choices on technical standards. An economic instrument raises revenue. That's certainly one thing we've learned from the European Trading Scheme. The Copenhagen Accord says, well, there's a very ambitious funding target and nobody's fully stepping up to the plate to suggest that it will be funded entirely through taxpayers' revenues, so the high-level group is explicitly mandated to consider new revenue sources. And I would suspect international bunker fuels is one place that they certainly could and should start looking.
Very good, thanks for that. David, okay, I think we have one now that's probably more suited to you. To what extent was the Danish text a clear indication that developing nations are essentially sold out by more powerful nations?
That's putting it a little bluntly, but there's certainly an element of truth in that. And certainly, I know that many of the negotiators within the least developed nations and low-income nations, small island nations, felt that all the effort that they put into the negotiation had just come to naught.
Okay.
Actually, can I comment on one really good question that I've got?
Yes, yeah.
And this is a comment that is adaptation about downscaling of outputs and actions for adaptation? Well, absolutely yes. Mitigation you can plan at national level. Adaptation is all around local competence, local capacity, local knowledge, local ability. And that's one of the difficulties in knowing how to support it, because lots of funding doesn't necessarily produce the funding available locally to do what's needed locally.